All right, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to Week 6 edition of Hot Takes and Hot Cakes with the Sportable NFL show. And you're here with me, Matt Harmon, as you can see on my lovely little lower third there. And we're here with my friend Dan. And Dan, how's it going this morning?
Good, Matt. Happy to be here. Yeah, just to reiterate, Matt said, if you don't know already, if you're just watching the show for the first time, or if you've been watching for weeks, either way, go check out Sportable.is. Me and Matt both contribute there during the week. We have a bunch of stuff out there. It's a great site. It's basically sports to the point, fantasy football to the point. We cut out all the clutter, and that's the whole point, really. You want actionable information, you want it quickly, and you don't want to have to waste your time. We all have tight schedules. I know that. So don't waste your time. Go right to Sportable.is. Check out what we have to offer, and if you don't like it, then you can move on. But you might as well give it a shot. I think you'll like it. So anyway, glad to be here for Week 6. I think looking at the games, I look at an overall perspective. I have a podcast that does a similar piece of this with matchups, and I noticed that I don't think it's going to be the most high-scoring week. The matchups don't really pit terrible defenses, too many terrible defenses versus terrible offenses. A lot of the teams that like to get off pace are facing each other, so that'll kind of slow down some of the other games. But I do think that there's a lot of interesting daily plays this week, just because a lot of the daily sets haven't caught up to some of the roles. Golden Tate, Joique Bell, Mohamed Sanu. A lot of these players have different roles this week based on injuries, and the daily leagues haven't really caught up on it. So I want to touch on a lot of those this week, and we'll get into our normal play this week. We're going to do our matchups. We're going to answer questions first, and at the end, as they come through, do a few matchups me and Matt like, and then a few players we think have a real chance to break out this week.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be fun, and we're going to run through all this at a pretty good pace. So let's get right to it with some of the questions that we've got. And this first one comes in from @what_a_Nate. I always enjoy reading his Twitter handle. He asks us, I have to start one. Which Tampa Bay #Bucks do I start in my flex? Doug Martin or Vincent Jackson? Dan, which one out of Doug Martin and Vincent Jackson do you like more this week?
Yeah, so today we just read, at least I read 5 minutes ago, and it must have came out a little while ago, that Vince Jackson's going to play. He didn't practice all week until Friday, where he got in a session. That's pretty much enough for him. He knows this offense by now, and his connection with Glennon is undeniable. He's had double-digit targets in the last 2 games with Mike Glennon, and to me, he's just the much safer play, and he has a higher ceiling as well. More upside and more safety with the floor. So to me, this one's Jackson easily. He gets the targets. He's displayed more for you and your fantasy team than Doug Martin has. And it's not always my preference. It's generally not my preference to suggest receiver over running back. But this one to me just stands out too much. Matt, how do you see it?
Yeah, and I'm a little bit the other way in that I love to suggest receivers over running backs. I hate running backs. That's a well-known fact. But anyway, so I think that you're right here on Jackson in this case too. Martin honestly hasn't looked like a good player at any point this season, and honestly hasn't really looked great at all since that rookie year in 2012. And the circumstances have certainly not been great either. But at the same time, he's not displaying anything special to me, and I don't think that this is that good of an offense that I want to break ties in favor of putting guys in there. But if it's on the same team, I think I'm going to go Vincent Jackson, especially because that Ravens secondary, they have a few good players, but also some of their guys have been disappointing thus far. Ladarius Webb hasn't played like himself this year. Jimmy Smith seems to be developing, but he's really the only one that's played up to snuff in the secondary. Matt Elam's been a disappointment. So I think Vincent Jackson can get over on the secondary, and we know Glennon loves to feed him the ball. So I think Dan and I both agree there. Vincent Jackson is the call. And this one comes in from one of our faithful listeners, @BallIsTim on Twitter, and he asks us, I picked up Andre Williams and Brandon Oliver in several leagues due to injuries. How do you rank them with other running backs going forward? So for this week, I think I still like Oliver over Williams. I know Williams is a guy who has a really good reputation coming out of college. He was super productive at Boston College, and he's a hard-nosed runner. The Eagles' defense doesn't scare anyone. But Oliver is playing, against the Raiders, and obviously starting players against the Raiders is always a good idea. He's more involved as a pass catcher than Williams is, so if you're in a PPR league, I think you have to like that. He's just in general, he's more of a big play guy, and I mean, I really just loved what I saw from Oliver last week against the Jets, who were a little bit banged up front, but are still in general a good run defense. So, I like Oliver a lot, and he could be a guy, and talking about him going forward, I think that he could be a guy that carves out a more niche role in the future as opposed to Andre Williams, because Oliver's so good as a pass catching back, and he can really step into that Danny Woodhead role going forward. Whereas once Rashad Jennings comes back, I'm not sure that Williams is going to see the field a bunch. So I think I like Oliver this week and going forward more than Andre Williams. Do you disagree with me, Dan, as a Giants fanboy or as an analyst?
Well, anything I ever answer is as an analyst, so I don't like your tone there. But,
I'm just messing with
him.
He's not biased, but I like to poke fun.
Not everyone admits to being a fan of their team on these type of things on fantasy football podcasts and on anything, but I don't care. I've admitted it long ago. I don't really care. Anyway, I do like Oliver more going forward and this week as well than Andre Williams. I like what I've seen talent-wise from Williams, but I do think that when Jennings gets healthy, Williams' role will drop a little bit. I don't think it's going to be back to how it was at the beginning of the year. Because I think Williams will have a chance to prove himself, both as a runner, receiver, and pass protector. But I think, and maybe they'll want to keep Jennings a little fresher, but I think overall it'll be more of Jennings' show. With Oliver, Matt said it best. He's going to carve out at minimum a Danny Woodhead role, and really there's a chance for a lot more. I mean, Ryan Matthews, it hasn't even resumed running yet. That report just came out this week. That's not a good sign, and he's been injured a lot in his career, and now he's going to be coming back off an injury. So either maybe they're going to want to ease him back into a role, or just try to keep him fresh the rest of the year by having him in a more of a split role with Oliver, or just Oliver kind of takes the lead. I mean, Oliver, I wrote about Oliver this week in a few pieces because I love Oliver. I mean, this guy looks awesome to me. I rewatched that Jet game on Game Rewind, just watching Oliver's plays, and he's got incredible burst, incredible agility. He makes people miss in the open field. He forces missed tackles. He breaks tackles. He doesn't have incredible long speed, like straight line speed, but that doesn't really even matter. I mean, you don't need your fantasy guy. You don't need your running back to put a 70-yard touchdown to the house for you to score. He can get a lot of 15-yard to win a game. So he'll catch passes, and like Matt said, this week he draws an incredible matchup with Oakland. He's really one of my. I had trouble not taking him in almost all daily leagues this week, and I did add Williams as well into that because I think Williams' role will be nice. But the thing with Oliver is Oliver has, even though it's been a very, very, very small sample size, so I don't know how much I want to put into this, but Oliver has been a much better pass protector than Williams so far this year, which does play a major role for NFL teams. They don't want to get the running backs on the field that they can't protect. So I really think Oliver has shown me more, and he has a better chance for a long-term role.
No, I definitely agree with everything you're just saying, and way to prove yourself as a non-biased observer by going with Oliver there. And
just wait till we get to the Giants-Eagles matchup later, though.
Well, I'm sure we'll see some of that fanboy come out, but that's quite all right. Yeah, Oliver's great, and not to get into too much scouting stuff, which is something else I do, football-wise, but Oliver, I love those short squat backs like Oliver is because they can really get through the hole in a hurry, and it's tough for guys to get their arms around them. And also, they just have incredible leverage to break tackles, which is why you see a smaller guy like Oliver have so much power, his legs and everything like that. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of what I've seen so far, and going forward, honestly, I think he's going to be good. So, good call by you, Dan. All right, so we'll move right along through more questions. This one's pretty short and sweet. PPR, Matt Asiata or Darren McFadden, and I'm assuming that means this week. So Dan, Asiata or Darren McFadden, which one do you prefer?
So I'm going to go with Asiata here. To me, I think this Vikings offense moves a lot better with Teddy Bridgewater at the helm. I mean, I'm just basing this off of one game I saw, but I really don't have to just base it off of that because I watched Teddy Bridgewater extensively in college, and I watched his draft breakdown videos once he came into the draft, and I was steadfast on him being my number one quarterback the whole time. He just hits the intermediate levels well. He reads the defenses better than these other quarterbacks coming in. He's just more advanced, so he moved that offense well. Of course, it was against a crappy Atlanta defense, but, I mean, at the same time, I just think that Asiata has a chance for more scores. Asiata has a chance to be on the field more. I don't want to buy into this. The thing is with this Raiders offense, they're just, to me, they have a chance to have the least time of possession on offense this week in all the games and all the teams. The Chargers don't run an up-tempo offense. They control the ball a lot, and they score a lot, and they get a lot of yards, but it's mostly methodical, long drives. And that's kind of the way Mike McCoy likes to work and run his team. He did that last year successfully to beat the Broncos in that game, everyone remembers. And he likes to keep his defense off the field, and that's just smart. You want your offense on the field. You can score more that way and give up less points. So, to me, I'd bench every single Raider this week. I can't play a single one. I don't think they're going to get that many opportunities, and so that would mean I would put almost anyone over McFadden. But I don't mind Asiata with a chance for more scores and an offense that will move the ball better. How do you see it, Matt?
Yeah, this is a tough call for me, mostly because I think both the players are pretty gross. I don't really like either this week, or all that much in general, honestly. But with Asiata, I totally agree with everything you said about Bridgewater. I loved him too, as a prospect, and he's the guy that, he's making things happen, just like we all said he would. We're all, just like all the Vikings fans, are on the sideline, cheering Teddy, Teddy. We love the guy, and he's certainly making this offense go. But the thing about Asiata is, I mean, he's so hard to predict because if he doesn't score a touchdown, it's tough for me to like him that much. We saw what a disastrous game he had against the Packers last week, who haven't been a good run defense. But he didn't really get anything done. And this Lions defense has been great this year. I don't think people have quite caught up to the fact that, they're known for that dominant front four and everything, but they've been good at every level. There might not be a defense that's been better through the first few weeks than the Lions. They're especially tough up front, so it's hard for me to predict what Asiata's value is this week. If he scores, of course, this is going to look stupid, and he'll have a good day. But that's tough for me to predict. And for McFadden, the last 2 weeks he's had 4 catches. The last 2 weeks that the Raiders have played, they were obviously on bye last week, and they changed coaches and everything. So it's tough to say how this is going to go going forward. But he caught 4 passes against the Dolphins. He caught 4 passes against the Patriots the last 2 games that they've played. If you're in a PPR league, I actually might not mind starting McFadden over Asiata. Just because McFadden he's looked good. When I watch his film, he's looked pretty good. He just isn't finding a lot of open running room, but he's been better as a receiver. He's always been that type. And it looks like Derek Carr is going to play. By the way, he might look to him as a guy that's sort of a safety valve that he can dump the ball off to. So I actually might not mind playing McFadden over Asiata this week, just because that Lions defense is so tough. So, but either way, both options to me aren't that great. All right, moving along to our next question that we got, and that's Kyrie Robinson's value with Ingram back next week. This one's tough for me because I love Kyrie Robinson, and I think he's looked really good so far. I mean, he took that game-winning touchdown, the walk-off touchdown against the Bucks. That was all him last week, and he looked really good on that run. And in general, he's looked better and better as the games have gone on. So I like Kyrie Robinson a lot, but I'm nervous about what things are going to look like when Ingram comes back. And then honestly, it could render all of those backs irrelevant because we mentioned on the show last week that Travaris Cadet has been getting some good work in. He's kind of sapping some of Pierre Thomas's role, although Thomas had a great game last week. And with Ingram and back, he could kind of cancel out Robinson, and Robinson can in turn cancel out Ingram. So honestly, this New Orleans backfield might go back to being a mess. I don't think Kyrie Robinson's done enough to establish himself as a lead back or anything or take the offense over, but he hasn't done enough to get just taken off the field in every situation for Ingram either. So I have no idea. I think it's going to be a messy situation. Dan, what do you think about the New Orleans backfield when Ingram comes back?
Yes, I was going to just say the exact same thing. Kyrie Robinson, to me, has proven a lot in his time starting in place of Mark Ingram. He's shown in the pass game. He's shown in the run game. He's shown in pass protection. And I think that makes things trickier for Ingram. Ingram made a comment this week about how he expects to go right back to his role we saw in the first few weeks. And I think that's a little bit of him talking scared. Like, he sees, wow, this guy Kyrie Robinson looks good, and maybe this guy Kyrie Robinson deserves some snaps, is going to get some, and I think he will. And it will make this whole backfield a little messy. I don't think Ingram will retake his role. I don't think Robinson will keep this role he's had the past few weeks without Ingram. And like Matt mentioned, Tavares Cadet is going to get involved. But I do think one thing that could be interesting is that now with Jimmy Graham out for at least the next 2 weeks, potentially 3 or 4 weeks after this bye, which is a long time, and really, really, really sad for my main league auction that I spent the most money on any player on, which was Jimmy Graham. Sigh. Anyway, with Graham out, I think the offense can move in a different direction, and they could start to use the running backs a little more in the passing game, just because to make up for Graham being out and what they lost and losing the middle of the field with Graham. I mean, I like Josh Hill, an undrafted free, and 2 years ago was an undrafted free agent. He's a smaller tight end than Graham, but he's pretty good, and every time I've seen him, he's made plays on the field. He's a deeper league tight end to keep an eye on. Hill. Wrote a piece on him for RotoViz this summer. In case you want to check that out, you can probably Google it. But yeah, I think Hill will take some of that role, but I don't think Hill will take all of that role. And that's where guys like Tavares Cadet, Kyrie Robinson, Pierre Thomas can get involved in the passing game with arrow routes and little reel routes out of the backfield as well. So I'm interested to see if that changes. But again, I think this backfield will probably get messy.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like Sean Payton kind of likes it that way. So that looks like that's how we're headed. And this one comes from @Scott2345 on Twitter, and he asks us, this week, pick one, non-PPR, Mike Evans, Cooper, and I guess that's Riley Cooper, Andrew Hawkins, or Kenny Britt. Thanks. Well, right off the bat, I think you can eliminate Mike Evans because he's not playing. He's not healthy. So, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Dan, but I'm pretty sure he's out this week, and a few more after that.
Mike Evans?
Mike Evans, he's hurt, right?
Oh, he actually practiced this week. I have to check the latest to see if he's playing. No, he's actually expected to play this week.
Oh, is he? Okay. Yeah. Well, what do I know? What do I know? But I thought I'm pretty sure. I was pretty sure about that. But anyways, and Riley Cooper, I know he caught the touchdown last week, but he's looked pretty terrible before that. I'm actually going to go Andrew Hawk. Well, this is non-PPR, so it's kind of tough to go Hawkins. I mean, these are all pretty rough options. I think, honestly, I'll actually say Kenny Britt because I think that game between the Rams and the 49ers, we're going to preview that one later, but I think that could honestly turn into a bit of a shootout. And there's both the Rams' offense looks really good. Britt scored last week against the Eagles. He's a guy who's drawing a lot of coverage for Brian Quick, which has been great for Quick. But, I think Britt, he's the number 2 receiver there after Quick, but I think that he could get he could have a few good weeks like that. And honestly, I think that this game's there's gonna be a lot of points. So I think Britt could get into the end zone on Monday night. It's definitely a risky play, but I think I'd go Britt out of those guys. None of them are honestly all that intriguing to me. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, well, I would say this. If you could run to your waiver wire and still get Odell Beckham from the Giants, I'd slot him in over either of these guys or any of these 4 guys. And it's potential that you will, because receivers tend to hang around a little more, and if you're not in the league in the New York, New Jersey, tri-state area, he might be there. Anyway, if you can't do that, let's get back to this question, and I'm going to actually change it up. I think Britt would be my second favorite play, and this is barely he's barely edged by Riley Cooper, who I'll suggest to you, Cooper. I agree with Matt that touchdown is probably more unlikely to repeat itself. As we know in fantasy football, touchdowns regress more than anything else. They're very untelling of what's to come, but I'm just taking Cooper from a pure play perspective and a pure game flow perspective. I don't see the Rams-Niners being as big a shootout as Matt does. I don't think either team likes to play with huge pace, and they're going to be running the ball a lot, keeping the clock moving. But in this Giants-Eagles game, I think we're going to see a ton of offensive plays, and really, if the Giants, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie is banged up with hip and ankle injuries, and I think that'll mean Prince Amukamara will probably see Macklin most of the game, which means that Cooper will get a banged-up DRC. DRC has been great this year, but that's also been when healthy. I'm not sure he's going to be as good banged up. The Giants also lost their 3rd and 4th corner, Walter Thurman and Zach Bowman, and now Tremaine McBride will be playing as the slot corner, and he may play some snaps on the outside too, which is good for Cooper. So yeah, I just think that as stupid as it sounds, I think Cooper might catch a touchdown. I just feel like it could happen against these banged up corners, and to me, I just see more upside with him over a guy like Britt, who I don't think is going to have game flow working in his favor.
Yeah, and it's a dicey group there. So
Yeah.
who knows? And this one comes in from Scott as well, and he asked us, do you think I should trade Kelvin Benjamin for Andre Ellington and Ronnie Hillman? I also have Harvin, Larry Fitzgerald, Mohamed Sanu, and Sammy Watkins as my other wide receivers. So, Dan, what do you think he should do? You think that's a good trade?
Yeah, to me, this is a great trade for him. As much as I love Benjamin, and you can talk a lot more on Benjamin after this, so I'll leave it at that. I like him a lot as a receiver play every week going forward. I mean, you're getting Andre Ellington back, who's one of the few bulk carry workhorse backs in this league right now, and he's held up pretty well in the role. He's a threat to score on any play. It's pretty unbelievable. Carson Palmer's back this week. Maybe he'll be healthy going forward, or maybe he'll at least play going forward, which will definitely help that offense out. And he's put up numbers without Palmer. I love Ellington. I can't believe you had a chance to get him. And then just throw on a little cherry on top. You get Ronnie Hillman for a couple weeks until Ball comes back. I don't buy into the talk that C.J. Anderson will make too much of an impact. I think it'll be Hillman's offense. Hillman had some talent coming out of San Diego State. I like watching him play. He's shown nothing in the pros, but it's like his third year now, so maybe he's finally starting to get it and when to cut, how to read the blocks and everything, which I always thought was his biggest problem. Not talent. So yeah, I really like Hillman in that role, and just he's more of a flyer type play. But even just Ellington straight up for Benjamin, I like. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I like Kelvin Benjamin, and just to speak on him real quick, I know people are gonna have a lot of bad things to say about him after last week, and here's the deal with Benjamin is just I've been calling it the Kelvin coaster lately, and it's just the Panthers and his fantasy owners are just gonna have to kind of ride those up and downs that Kelvin gives you, because he's gonna have those weeks like last week where he looks messy, doesn't look in tune with the offense. He drops some passes, makes mistakes. So that's going to happen, and it can happen series to series. But the Panthers are still feeding this guy, and that's what matters. He's going to get targets, he's going to get yards, he's going to get touchdowns. So you just have to keep riding him. Don't worry. He's not a guy that I'm looking to sell right now. But for Andre Ellington, I think that's actually a really good trade. I think Ellington's primed to take off and be a running back one the rest of the season, because he's just he's very talented, he's really gifted, and this offense, I think, is going to have to kind of run through him with all the questions at quarterback, even though it looks like Carson Palmer might play this week. I like Ellington a lot, and I think straight up that's a good trade. Ronnie Hillman, we'll touch on that a little more later, but I'm not crazy about Hillman. But anyways, so I think that this is a good trade. This is the kind of trade I like to make. If you're loaded at receiver, and this guy isn't, I wouldn't say he's loaded, but he has plenty of good options with Harvin and Watkins. Or Stephen Ridley this weekend. It's PPR league. What do you think, Dan?
I'm sorry, I got cut off a little, got frozen. Can you repeat the question?
Okay, Dan. I think Dan's frozen over there, so I'll take this question real quick. So Ronnie Hillman versus Stephen Ridley for a PPR league. I think you're always going to kind of shy against Ridley in a week like this where you have a team in Buffalo that I think can actually be competitive with the Patriots. Ridley's much better as a closer, a guy who can get the tough yards in a situation where the Patriots are trying to run out the clock. That's when Ridley's at his best, when he's grinding out those yards on the way to a Patriots victory. And honestly, right now, I just see Buffalo's too good of a team for Ridley to have that sort of role this week. And in a PPR league, I mean, I'm not. Again, we'll talk more about this later with Ronnie Hillman. I'm not the biggest Hillman believer or a fan of his style as a runner. But I think in a PPR league, he probably has a little bit more safety this week than Ridley. So it's not a call that I like, but I think I would go Hillman this week just to see if the Broncos are legitimately going to give him a shot to be the number one running back, and if they do, he could be a guy who has a nice little role there. I think he can catch some passes, and he might have a little bit of a roll out of the backfield this weekend. So weighing the two against each other, I think that I would go Hillman this weekend. Again, it's not a call that I love or anything, but hey, it's something that you can do this week. And I just got asked another question here
Matt,
on
do you see
Twitter,
my
and
back in?
this will be the last one we do before we run to the matchups. Hopefully, we can get Dan back in here
Am I
soon.
back in?
And this one comes from at Stephanie 71 on Twitter, another loyal watcher of the show, and he asks us, which one do I start, Matt Ryan or Russell Wilson? After this week, I will consider trading one for a wide receiver one candidate. And so this one is interesting to me. I think that's a smart strategy by Michael, for one, to try to flip one of these quarterbacks. But we'll get to that one in a second. For this week, I actually think I'm going to go. I know Wilson has that intriguing matchup of the Dallas Cowboys secondary, but I'm definitely going to go with Matt Ryan this weekend. And mostly because the Bears and Falcons game has one of the highest point, I think it actually has the most points projected by Vegas, one of the higher point spreads, and that matters a lot for fantasy when it's a game that is going to score a lot of points. It's good to have a guy who's going to be the quarterback in that game, because you're looking at a quarterback who's going to throw a ton to Julio Jones, to Roddy White, who I think is a good play this week, and so honestly, I think that Ryan is the better option this week, Michael. The Chicago secondary doesn't scare me, and Atlanta's at home. Atlanta's a great team at home, much better than they are on the road. So I think Ryan this week is a good play. It's a game that's going to score a lot of points, and those type of games where, like this Falcons and Bears game, it's one where I like to kind of break ties in favor of playing people in those games, just because of the amount of points projected. It's a very nice situation there for anyone who's got fantasy players in that game. So yeah, I think I go Ryan this weekend, and then Russell Wilson could very well have a good game, and then you flip him for a wide receiver one type candidate, and you're good. So I think this is a nice situation for Michael to have. It does look like we're having a bit of a technical issue here, trying to get Dan back in the call.
Am I on?
They're with us here, and we will try to get these guys back in. Still working on getting Dan into the show. Over here, apologize for the difficulties, but that's sometimes what happens when you roll with Google. These sort of things can happen. Um, so another question that I got this morning on Twitter, and this one came in from, where is it? Looking for it right now. This one comes in from at the Bartuka, and he asks Kendall Wright or Lamar Miller at flex for a full PPR. This is a really tough call for me because I I like I like both players this week. I'm not sure that Moreno is just going to take the job back from Miller if he's playing. The Packers have been much better against the pass than they have the run. I think Miller is still going to be the starting running back there, and he's looked decent enough to be a starting fantasy asset. He could catch a few passes out of the backfield, which is good for the PPR aspect of it. And honestly, I think he's a good bet this week. As for Kendall Wright, you know, they're going against the Jacksonville secondary. It looks like Charlie Whitehurst is going to be the starting quarterback there, and he's a guy who loves to, you know, he didn't get the reputation of check down Charlie for no reason. He's a guy that he loves to throw those short passes, which is where Wright excels. He's great at those little short slant routes, and he's such a reliable receiver there that I think, you know, he's going to be a guy who catches a lot of passes this week, and is going to be a guy that is just really active today, catches a lot of passes. So for a full PPR league, I actually think I might go Wright just against that Jacksonville secondary. He looked like he had some good communication with Whitehurst last week. This is a guy that could just catch a ton of passes today. So I think I'm going to go with him this week over Lamar Miller, despite the fact that I like the matchup, I like his role. I think I'm going to go with Wright this week over Miller. It does look like we're having more trouble getting Dan back in the call.
Hey Matt, can you hear me?
Dropping in and out over here. It looks like on my end. So apologies if we don't get this back rolling. We'll see what happens here. Just bear with us.
Can you hear me?
Well, is everyone back now?
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Yeah. So I went ahead and when Dan dropped out of the call, I went ahead and sent TJ an invite, but it looked like nobody was there with me for a while. So I think I was.
This is our worst yet. I don't think we've gone a single week.
Oh my God.
We haven't got a single week without a technical difficulty. First of all, this one I'm blaming on Google Hangouts. They freaking suck.
I have no idea what just happened there.
You still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. I can hear you. Now.
Sorry, listener. If you're still here with us, and I don't blame you if you're not, let's try to get back into the football talk.
Yeah, we still got a few people here with us that bared through me talking to myself there. God bless them. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and go ahead and do the daily segment now, since I called the audible and tried to get TJ in here while we tried to get Dan back. So now that you're here, TJ, let me tweet out the link again and start start preaching your wisdom while we're here.
Absolutely. You guys want to jump into the daily stuff right now?
Yeah, go ahead and let's just push that segment up to right now.
Okay.
And kick it off.
All right. How you guys doing, by the way? Now that we're all here and live, the technical difficulties are
Good.
over.
You,
Good. It was real awkward there for a moment, but it looks like we made it.
Cool, cool. No, I'm doing
Oh
good.
my.
As always, just I don't know how I spend all my free time looking at football stuff, and then every Sunday morning I'm like rushing to put GPP lineups in. Um, no, but I'm doing good. I got one Twitter question from at FF Erroneous, our buddy Aaron over at Sportable, one of our
Yeah.
contributors. He asked me, do you play players with potential garbage time opportunities even against top pass defenses? I'm assuming he's just talking about DFS here, not season long. In general, I'm not really targeting a garbage time opportunity per se. Definitely not in a cash game. I guess by definition, if you're looking at someone that you think is going to be in garbage time, it's someone that's probably he says against a top pass defense. They're probably going to be pretty heavy underdogs if you expect them to be in garbage time. So in cash game, you kind of want that favorable game script, someone that's going to have a lot of targets. So in a cash game, definitely not. In a tournament, it's kind of going to depend just kind of on your definition of garbage time, I guess. I mean, if it's a game with a really high over under and if it's a spread that's maybe under a touchdown, you could target someone. If it's a top receiver, an elite guy, I'm not going to be too worried about a matchup. Something that might come to mind is someone like Dez. I can see the Cowboys being big underdogs if they're playing a tougher opponent and maybe think he's going to get some garbage time. So I would say only maybe if it's a receiver with elite upside potential, maybe in a bad matchup. But outside of that, it's probably something I'm avoiding. Is garbage time something you guys really consider? I mean, it's something you hear thrown around a lot, but I tend to favor guys that are, going to have a favorable situation throughout the whole game, not just maybe one or two drives at the end.
I think you're spot on
Yeah.
there, TJ. I think a common fallacy in fantasy football is this garbage time narrative that seems like some people still abide by more than I would think, because a lot of people who are deep readers into fantasy football, follow all the best sites, read all the best sites, read all the best news, are still believing in this. And really, it's almost the complete opposite. Some guys have done some good studies to prove this. I think Rich Rebar wrote something for RotoViz this summer I read, and I know Sean Siegel also agrees with this. The fantasy football contrarian. You want the guys who are the game flow is in their favor. You want the guys with the leads. You want the guys getting more offensive plays. You don't want the guys whose teams aren't going to be on the field much, and then just at the end they're playing zone coverage. Yes, it helps when you're catching 10-yard underneath routes at the end of the game. You get 3 or 4, and in a PPR league you maybe add a few 5, 6 points. But the fact of the matter is they hadn't been doing stuff the rest of the game because they hadn't been on the field. So I'm completely with you on that.
Yeah, but then at the same time, I agree in general with you guys are right on that call, but then sometimes you get a guy like Cecil Shorts who just consistently produced some garbage time a few years ago, so it can be kind of maddening to try to predict the case-by-case basis.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I agree with that, but yeah, in general, I kind of try to avoid it.
Yeah, definitely. Always play by the rules, not the exceptions. I agree.
Yeah. So before I jump into the picks, just kind of talk about some things that I'm looking at this week. Again, they're running that million maker on DraftKings again, which I've had my thoughts on Twitter and Sportable kind of about why I don't think that's awesome that they're doing it 2 weeks in a row. But
What's your take on that, real quick, Justin?
Without getting, I mean, I don't want to get on my soapbox too much because we'll be here till kickoff. But basically, I think that daily fantasy sports is still enough in its infancy that something that's so top heavy like this, where we're paying $1 million to first place and then 100 grand a second, that's a $900,000 difference. It's going to one person, and in general, a big chunk of that money probably is going to return to the DFS economy. I think doing that multiple weeks in a row, and then they're
Right.
going to be running more this season. Having $1 million in 1 week leave the DFS economy in the long term, I don't think is a net positive for DFS as a whole. Like I said, especially in an industry that's relatively young, and we're kind of setting up this situation where you're promoting this big event where you're likely going to have a lot of new players come and not have a good experience their first time.
Right.
Very
Right.
minimal chance at having a experience where they win money. Obviously, any new player is going to have less experience to win money, but something that top heavy, you're really getting yourself on a slippery slope. It's I come from a poker background, and poker websites, when they started getting really big, they did a lot of things that favored greed in terms of revenue for the site, and hopefully the DFS sites start uh, going down that road too much. I kind of hope they learn from the poker sites' mistakes rather than copying them. But we'll see. I mean, in the short term, it's good. It's really good marketing. You know, you have people winning $1 million, so it looks good. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff I've been seeing in general from just the marketing and I don't remember who I was talking to on Twitter saying that the commercials almost kind of seem like this scam, like win money quick. But I mean, it's my passion. It's my favorite thing in the world. So hopefully it doesn't turn into something too negative. But let's jump into the fun stuff for the week.
Right, but those are some good thoughts, and that's a good point that you made
Yeah,
there. I agree
yeah.
with that.
Um, Again, they're running that Millionaire Maker on DraftKings this week. So again, 92,000 people competing for a chance to win $1 million. It looks like they might not fill it this week. I think they're sitting at about 70,000 entrants right now.
Hmm.
So theoretically, there could be some overlay in the Millionaire Maker, but again, it's top heavy, so the overlay is not going to add a ton of EV when there's 92,000 people playing. If you're looking for a little contrarian strategy, if you're playing in the Millionaire Maker, rather than a contrarian pick, something I've kind of been toying with this week is playing one of your top quarterback plays without a stack. In tournaments, we've talked about stacks before on here. In general, people in GPPs are going to be looking for a big stack to play. If you look for a quarterback, someone like Nick Foles this week, who's in a game, I'll touch on him a little bit more later, but he's in a game with a really high over/under, and he kind of spreads the ball around a lot. Play someone like him without stacking with one of his receivers. It can give you an opportunity to have a unique lineup when everyone else is stacking with their quarterback with one of their wide receivers or tight ends or whatnot. Some of the top value plays on DraftKings this week. I post a card every week on Sportable that goes over them. In general, these are usually fit into cash games a little bit better than GPPs just because they're the top values of the week. Russell Wilson at 7,600 going against the Cowboys. Russell Wilson's been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league as far as completion percentage and touchdown rate this year. Seattle's favored by 8 versus Dallas. They're projected to score just under 28 points. And then Russell Wilson also is going to add a couple points with his legs. That's something that, even though we've talked about, in our community, Konami code and whatnot, it still doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. I mean, 40 yards rushing, that's an extra touchdown in scoring. That's huge, and Russell Wilson's one of the rare Konami code quarterback, so to speak, that is actually a good quarterback. So I really like Russell Wilson for your cash games at $7,600. Joik Bell, $3,700 on DraftKings. He's super cheap. I think he's $6,400 on FanDuel. I'm not exactly sure, but he's really cheap on DraftKings. Reggie Bush is banged up. I still don't know if he's officially ruled out. Have you guys heard anything
It's
about Reggie?
looking like he's out.
He's out. So, yeah. So and then Calvin Johnson's also
Hmm.
out. Minnesota's underrated pass defense, so I could imagine a lot of joy against Minnesota. He catches the ball. A lot of people, I mean, You guys know that he's a good pass catcher. A lot of people probably still have that perception that Reggie Bush is the pass catcher in that offense, but Joik's a really good pass catcher. DraftKings full PPR. He's going to be a really nice play today. Vincent Jackson at 5,700. He's probably my favorite value as far as difference between price and projection. I think he's projected like in the top 12. Vincent Jackson isn't generally a receiver I want to play in my cash games. In cash games, I want guys that have a little bit shallower average depth of target, a stat that Pro Football Focus has under their fantasy tab. It's one of my favorite stats to look at. Those shallower targets, high percentage. But Vincent Jackson's market share is through the roof, especially since Mike Glennon's taken over. So at $5,700, he's probably going to be a really nice value if you want to play him in your GPPs. Larry Donnell at tight end, or Donnell. I'm not exactly sure which
No,
one it
yeah.
is, but at $3,500, his price really fell on DraftKings. Something I've noticed on DraftKings, they've been having really reactionary pricing. I don't
Yes.
know if it's the algorithm that they're using, or if they just don't have their guys going in there adjusting it. But he had a goose egg last week, and he was priced, in the top 6 or 7 on both FanDuel and DraftKings last week after his big game. FanDuel kept his price relatively high. On DraftKings, it dropped down really low. I think he's priced 17th. He still is top 3 in targets, still tops in red zone targets among tight ends. So he had that bad game against Atlanta last week. Atlanta's actually number 1 in fantasy points allowed and adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. So actually, if you've been digging into the numbers, no huge surprise last week. This week they're Philly's actually decent against tight ends, but they just get roasted in the passing game no matter what. And Larry Donnell, I'd expect his targets to go back up. So at $3,500, I think he's worth a play. He doesn't need to score a ton of points to meet value. So I really like him there. Those are my overall top values. Again, we have this millionaire maker running, so people are going to be looking for some contrarian plays. The most popular one of the most popular quarterbacks this week, I think, is going to be Matt Ryan at home. I'm probably going to want some exposure to him, but he's going to be really highly owned. It's an over/under of 53.5. They're projected for a little over 28 points against Chicago, who's ranks 25th in adjusted fantasy points against. That's a stat that you can find on 4for4.com. It's a really good predictive stat. A lot better than looking at raw fantasy points allowed. Um, one thing you could kind of do to get an idea of who some underowned guys might be is on DraftKings, since they have the late swap, you don't get to see everyone's lineup. If you play Thursday slates, if you play some Thursday slates on FanDuel, you can get a relatively good idea of who some of the most highly owned guys are going to be. It's obviously going to vary by value guys. Just because pricing is going to be different on sites, obviously, but the elite guys are generally going to be the most popular plays across the board just because of matchups. So quarterbacks, Eli, Peyton, and Matt Ryan were the most highly owned guys on FanDuel on the Thursday slates. So if you kind of want to go for one of the under-owned quarterbacks, Nick Foles. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about him. A lot of people are talking about Eli in that game because Eli's been, I mean, rightly so. Eli's surprisingly been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in terms of completion percentage, especially on his aim throws and touchdown rate. I mean, it's obviously skewed a little bit by that 4 touchdown game, but especially over the last 3 weeks, he's been really good. So everyone's talking about Eli, but Nick Foles, he's the one that's at home in that game. Philly's favored by 2.5. The over/under is 50 points. He's only 6,800 on DraftKings. He's the 11th rate quarterback. I think Philly leads the league in plays ran. So they're gonna score some points in this game, and everyone's talking about Eli. So Nick Foles is gonna be he's probably one of my favorite targets in GPPs on DraftKings this week. As far as running backs that are probably going to be a little under-owned this week, a lot of people are going to be on the top guys. Matt Forte has a super juicy matchup with Atlanta, so I'm going to want some exposure to him. But Bishop Sankey, against Jacksonville. It looks like he's gonna finally get his chance to shine, to show off that new and improved footwork that we've been joking about against Jacksonville. Uh, Tennessee's favored by 6. Sankey's only $3,500. Jacksonville is 30th in adjusted fantasy points against running backs. In that same game, it looks like Storm Johnson's going to get the start for Jacksonville. I don't like him as much as Sankey. But I think he might catch some balls, something that Jacksonville running backs haven't done so far this year. Again, DraftKings is full PPR, and let me see if I could bring up his price here. Storm Johnson is
I'm pretty sure he's minimum, yeah.
minimum salary as expected. The adjusted fantasy points allowed from Tennessee isn't as attractive, but they do have one of the Tennessee does have lowest graded run defenses on Pro Football Focus. So again, I wouldn't be putting Storm Johnson in any cash lineups, but if you're looking for some for a running back that's going to be a little underowned, that's going to free up some salary for you, he could be a good option. Wide receivers. I wish this guy was getting a few more targets the last few weeks. Pierre Garçon, he only has 7 targets over the last 2 weeks, but beginning of the season and then obviously going back to last season, he's one of the most targeted players in the league. Even with just 4 targets and 3 targets in the last 2 weeks, he's still averaging almost 8 targets a game. Arizona is dead last in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They're dead last in rank versus wide receiver 1 on Football Outsiders. Is one of those stats I've talked about on here a lot. That's been a really good predictive measure for me. He's only 5,800 on DraftKings. Arizona hasn't been great against wide receivers. Just because his targets have been down the last couple weeks, I think he's going to be really under-owned. Deshaun Jackson is 4,900 on DraftKings, so if people are playing a wide receiver from that game from the Redskins, I'm guessing they're going to be going Deshaun because he's generally the GPP play, just because he's the home run guy. But we've seen Garcon get over the top before. He can score right there with Deshaun. So I like Garcon as a tournament play. On DraftKings this week, I might even be getting him into some of my cash game lineups, just because, like I said, I expect someone like Pierre Garcon to his numbers to normalize towards his high targets, because he is the possession receiver on that offense. So he's a guy that I'm really looking at in GPPs this week. Another guy that hasn't got off to a start everyone's expected, but this might be one of the guys that breaks out. Torrey Smith. I'm kind of stealing this one from Rich Rebar. He was talking about it on his podcast this week, and Rich Rebar is always right, a lot more than me. So I think he can. Torrey Smith can have a good game against Tampa Bay, who's just been awful against the pass, awful against wide receivers. They're second worst in defense against opposing number 1 wide receivers. I don't even know if he's considered the number 1 wide receiver at this point with Steve Smith, but that stat is something to look at. So Torrey Smith is a nice contrarian play, only $4,100 on DraftKings. I already touched on Larry Donnell. Not too many tight ends that I think are going to be really big off the board plays. Greg Olsen and Delaney Walker have the most attractive matchups for guys that aren't the top guys. Julius Thomas, 6,700, Crockett, 5,800. They're both going to be heavily used. They both have pretty good matchups. So those are kind of some of the guys that I'm really looking at. The only really maybe under-owned guy that I might want to throw in there is Owen Daniels. I just kind of touched on Torrey Smith, but I think Owen Daniels, his targets have been up since Pitt has been out. He gets some red zone looks. Tampa Bay isn't good at all in the passing game against tight ends, against wide receivers, against quarterbacks. So Owen Daniels is a cheaper guy if you're looking for a cheap tight end. Those are some of my top values and top GPP plays of the week. Sorry for being a little long-winded there, but there was a lot to talk about this week.
Yeah, you got a lot of good calls in there, TJ, and a lot of those I agree with. Just to intervene for a second, sorry to cut you off, Matt.
Okay.
I'm playing Donnell this week. I'm playing Bell. A lot of the things that I was going to try to get your take on, TJ, and I think you kind of touched on it. I didn't even have to ask. Is that I think DraftKings, we've talked about this before. It's very reactionary in their pricing. I agree with you. I have no idea what algorithm they're using. It's screwed up, whatever it is. And it's like something to take advantage of, but it's also at the same time kind of crappy for the people like us who do more of the work and research because everybody can see these obvious plays and they can use them. Vis-a-vis, if it was priced all correctly, the better players would be able to find the values themselves. So that sucks, but I do think one more thing with DFS that I'm trying to chase now going forward, just because not always everyone will see this either, is that both sites as well, they don't really catch up their pricing with with changes in role. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. So guys like Golden Tate, guys like Joy Bell, guys like Andre Williams, those guys who now have a new role. Golden Tate, obviously, because Calvin's out and things like that. Same with Mohamed Sanu because AJ's out. The pricing doesn't adversely get affected. So I think that's a huge thing that you have to look for in DFS. And what were you going to say, Matt?
Yeah, I just want to get your take on two quick DraftKings pricing players that I actually kind of like this week, TJ. And one is Roddy White, who I looked at his price and it was really low. I know he hasn't been great this year. He's certainly not up to my expectations, but this is a game that, like you said, there could be a ton of points scored, and the Falcons are at home. I've actually gone with the dreaded triple stack approach, which is much better for a Wendy's burger than. Oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. But anyways,
The kickoff yet, and we're talking about Wendy's burgers. Let's at least stick with the breakfast menu.
I don't even know what's wrong. I don't even know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I said that. But so Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and then sticking Roddy White on the end of there just because he's so cheap.
Sure.
What do you think about White this week at that low DraftKings price?
I didn't get to Roddy White just because I didn't want to keep us here till kickoff, but
Right.
I love Roddy White at $4,800. Like you said, he's been bagged up, but he's still averaging almost 8 targets a game. The Bears, they're bottom 10 in points against wide receivers, bottom 10 in adjusted fantasy points against wide receivers. I kind of touched on it with Matt Ryan. That game has a big over-under, and Falcons are expected to score over 4 touchdowns. I think Roddy White's one of the best values on the site. I didn't touch on him just because Garcon was probably more of the ignored guy, but Roddy White's a great value for both cash game. I'm playing him in all my cash games on DraftKings and GPPs. A lot of people are probably be looking to stack Matt Ryan with Julio, so I love Roddy White. I think Julio is not. Let me see.
He's expensive.
He's really expensive. He is 8,400. He's 9,100 on FanDuel, 8,400 on DraftKings, and Roddy White's 4,800. So usually if there's two players of similar talent on an explosive offense like that, either their prices are priced closer, or the popular guy is the cheaper guy, just because they're usually perceived pretty much the same. In this situation, you're getting almost a $4,000 discount, so it's going to free you up everywhere. I love Roddy White this week. That's a really good call.
And just
one of my top values. Go ahead.
Just to touch on that one real quick, aside from just what you mentioned, TJ, which is great and true, they're close in talent, far apart in value. They also have a much different matchup this week. I wrote about this. Roddy White's going to have an incredible matchup. So Julio Jones, for the most part, is going to take on. He's going to line up across from Kyle Fuller. Fuller plays the split end most of the game, and Julio Jones lines up at split end on over 60% of his snaps. So Roddy White will get to face off against Sherrick McManus, who's coming back off a 3-week injury. He was not really a good cornerback to begin with, but they cut Isaiah Frey this week, before this week, and he was their original slot corner. So now their plan is to move Tim Jennings into the slot on 3 receiver sets and use McManus on the outside. So he'll see a lot of Roddy White in coverage as Atlanta uses a lot of 11 personnel. So I
would say 95% of the people that would watch this show, or in general out there, don't even know who that person that you just named is. And so I think
That's a really good call by you, Dan. I'm admittedly lack in looking at individual matchups, wide receiver versus cornerback. But if you look at again going back to that fantasy outsiders versus types of wide receiver stat. Chicago is the second worst in the league against number two wide receivers. Roddy is a clear number two, which is sometimes a little fuzzy who a clear number two is, but he's a clear number two. Chicago is the second worst in the league versus number two wide receivers. Um, just going back to what you were saying about the general pricing, Dan, on DraftKings, how reactionary it's been. I think I touched on this last week, but I'm kind of hoping this is the case, that it's just a function of this millionaire maker. And you were saying how there's so many glaring values when they have this wide open pricing. What that does for people that don't know, and why you said it's not great for people that are putting in the work like us, you're going to see a lot of overlap if they don't have these glaring values, this wide open pricing. So with this millionaire maker, I'm kind of hoping that DraftKings is kind of doing this on purpose, this wide open pricing, just so they don't end up with a ton of overlap of maybe just one or two obvious value plays. Again, there's 92,000 people competing in their most marketed tournament of the year. So hopefully they're just kind of trying to avoid a situation where there's tons of exactly the same lineups. So we'll see what happens without a millionaire maker. But in general, yeah, DraftKings has been super reactionary, and it leads to kind of a poor situation for people that put in the work. And you might want to kind of just cut back on cash games on DraftKings because of that.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to be said about that. And my last question for you here, TJ, is about another player that I thought had low pricing that I don't think you mentioned. And I've got one lineup where I actually have both of the players I'm talking about right now. And then the second one there is Jordan Cameron at tight end. Cameron, I was a big Cameron guy headed into the season myself. I thought he could take that step into the elite tight end category. It hasn't happened yet. With his injury and everything, but I think he's getting healthier, and that Browns offense is surprisingly is rolling right now with Brian Hoyer, and he looks good, better than I expected, honestly. So, and Cameron, I think we can all agree that he's probably the most talented player on that offense for sure. So, and the Steelers haven't been a great defense, and they've been banged up at inside linebacker. So I've kind of thought that's a good, and he's 3,600, so that's right, just $100 more than Donnell. So I thought that's kind of a good, more swing for the fences sort of play.
Yeah, I like that a lot in GPPs. I wouldn't be touching the cash games, but we saw what an integral part of the offense Jordan Cameron could be last year, even with Josh Gordon on the team. Without Josh Gordon, you have to think that he's gonna start seeing a heavier workload as the season progresses, as he gets reacclimated from that injury a little bit. I think he only had 6 targets last week. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Something like that.
6 or 7 targets. I think he had 3 catches. Yes. So with my tight ends, I'm generally looking for targets and red zone targets. We know Cameron's going to get those eventually. So I do like Cameron at 3,600 for GPPs. I haven't fit him into any of my lineups, just the way I've constructed my lineups. I didn't have him anywhere, but I think that's a really good call, and he actually might be a guy that I've kind of overlooked, and I might kind of have to squeeze him in somewhere. Pittsburgh's 23rd in adjusted fantasy points against tight ends. Jordan Cameron is priced 14th at tight ends, but I do an aggregate of number fire and 4-for-4 projections. He's projected 9th in those aggregate projections. So quite a big gap. When there's not a whole bunch of people to choose from at tight end. So I think that's a really good call on your part, and only $100 more than Donnell, and obviously way more talented player.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one that stuck out to me, and then there's a few like that. Well, TJ, we appreciate you coming on every week and dropping some knowledge on a segment we're all trying to get better at, and that's daily fantasy. It's booming in popularity.
hopefully next week we'll be doing it all together from Vegas after one of us wins the million. We'll uh,
Oh
we'll,
man.
we'll do it from a suite at the Bellagio. How does that
Can we
sound?
all agree to that now? If one of us wins, we're all three going to Vegas next weekend. I can get on board with that.
Hey, why not? Yeah, I mean, hey, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would be
TJ, by the
great.
way,
Well, good luck to you, TJ, this weekend.
All right, guys. Good luck to you
TJ,
too.
by the way, I don't know if you saw it, but you got a big shout out, a major shout out on a podcast I listen to every week. It's called Late Round QB with JJ Zakaris and what's his name, CDC Carter, whatever, Denny Carter. Anyway, great podcast. I like
Oh,
listening to it every week, and they gave you a major shout out. It was cool.
yeah, those are my guys. Yeah, I told them I owe them a couple milkshakes. They always joke they're going to get milkshakes
Yeah,
after the pod, so I told them milkshakes on me. Yeah,
there
I
you
heard
go.
that. Those guys are awesome. It was sweet.
Yeah, man.
All right, thanks guys. Good luck this
All
week.
right,
I
thanks
hope,
for
hope you
coming
guys
on.
win the million. All
Yep, you
right, later.
Catch you later, TJ. All right, so Dan, we're gonna just run through real quick on these matchups. Our little technical difficulty there in the middle kind of took our time a little longer than we normally like to. But so let's real quick go through Giants and Eagles. You want to kick this one off? As we said, you are the fanboy, so go ahead.
Yeah. All right. If you want to call me that, I guess we're just sticking with that. Yeah. Anyway, so
It's a thing now, so we might as well just accept it.
yeah, we might as well accept it. All right. So anyway, this is, in my opinion, going to be the highest scoring matchup of the weekend, and also the most offensive plays, most yardage in the matchup. I'm actually even more confident that it will be the most yardage and offensive plays than points. But anyway, I mean that'll still lead to fantasy points. Anyway, both these teams run up-tempo offenses. Giants offensive coordinator back Ben McAdoo has admitted that he liked using a more slower tempo and methodical tempo last week, but it doesn't matter to me if he likes it or not because the Eagles have a strong run defense, they're the 10th best according to Pro Football Focus, and they get burned in the passing game. So again, I see the Giants attempting to establish a run game and before just moving to 11 personnel, shotgun, let Eli pick apart the Eagles defense because listen, this Eagles defense is reeling right now. Michael Kendricks for sure is out. He's their speedy playmaking outside linebacker and he actually plays in the middle, I'm pretty sure. They're 3-4, and he makes plays everywhere on the field in the run game, in coverage, as a blitzer. He's likely out. D'Amico Ryans is going to try to gut it through and play, but he's still questionable. I think by the time the game hits, he may as well sit as well. So we're going to see Casey Matthews on the field in the middle of the field a lot, which is why I love Larry Donnell in this matchup. I can see the Giants targeting him and using him in the middle of the field. Last week, TJ didn't mention on this, but his goose egg, for some reason, I guess not for some reason, but the Falcons decided to double team Donnell on a ton of plays last week, which was shocking to me. They did the Bill Belichick approach in Super Bowl 46, where he said, "This is still a cruising Knicks game. Let's not let either of them beat us." And this is kind of what he did last week with Donnell and Cruz, and that's why guys like Beckham and Randall help the Giants offense score. This week, the other guy I see winning a lot is Odell Beckham. So Beckham Jr., this is a guy who ran a 4.43 with a 38.5-inch vertical. He has incredible agility. To me, he reminded me a ton of Antonio Brown when I watched his tape. I've heard this comparison before, and I can't not say it because it's what I see. But just almost a better vertical route runner than him. I really love his talent. And I think talent generally wins out in fantasy football, and it ascends to bigger roles quicker than we think it does. So this week, Beckham's going to see a ton of Kyrie Williams on the outside. Kyrie Williams exclusively defends the split end, and the Giants have been using Beckham at the split end a little more than Randall. Randall will play outside, and he'll play a little split end, mostly flanker on the other side. So that means Beckham's going to have this great one-on-one matchup a lot with Kyrie Williams, who's been one of the worst cornerbacks in the league this year. So I love Beckham this week. I'm playing him in my tourneys. I'm stacking him with Eli, who's I believe the 14 on FanDuel. I can get this up right now. On FanDuel, he's in the teens on both FanDuel and DraftKings as far as pricing for quarterbacks go. So I mean, just in general, Eli's a great play, but my favorite plays in this game are Eli, Beckham, and Donnell. On the other side of the ball, I think that the Giants defense will give up some yardage and some points this week with a banged-up Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. They've had trouble stopping this offense in the past. It's a good offense, and they're at home. I like playing a lot of my Eagles this week. Then again, I'm not going to say I'm too bullish on McCoy yet. I didn't like what I saw last week from McCoy. He had one or two flashes of his old self, and besides that, we didn't see any of his old self. And they legitimately bench him for Sproles down the stretch. It's making a lot of media rounds this week. He's playing it off. Sproles is playing it off. The coach said, I see them both as guys I can play whenever I want. But I mean, like, it was weird to see McCoy on the bench in the fourth quarter for Sproles in a game that was getting close at the end. So I'm confused on that, and I'm thinking we might see more of an even timeshare than we've seen all season in that game, which is shocking and surprising to some. But the way McCoy's playing, I'm not sure it's that shocking to me. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think this is a game where there's going to be a lot of points, and I thought you made some good observations there. I like the Giants a lot, especially Odell Beckham. You mentioned I was a big fan of his as a draft prospect. I mean, other than height, he has everything you want as a wide receiver. He goes up for those contested passes. I mean, I said this right after he scored that touchdown last week. That's a play you saw him make over and over and over again at LSU. Was just, despite his small stature, box out an NFL corner, making plays like that. That's just something you saw from Odell Beckham. And this week he gets to go against Kerry Williams, who has just been burnt over and over again throughout his career, and even more so. It's been even more so exacerbated this year because of the his decision to make a bunch of noise about how the Eagles are practicing too hard. So Odell Beckham's a good play. I like a lot of Giants in this game, and the Eagles as well. I think this is a game that's going to score a lot of points. The Sunday night matchup. So break ties in favor of putting fantasy players in that are in this game. Next matchup that we're going to highlight is the Rams and the 49ers. I picked this one to highlight because there's a lot that I like here. I think it's been well established that I'm a Brian Quick guy at this point, and I think he can definitely have a strong outing against a San Francisco secondary that's not very talented right now. He can get it done. Austin Davis is playing really well. He's just that type of backup quarterback that gets in there and just pulls the trigger, sort of like a Case Keenum last year. I think we might have made that comparison last week. He's just letting it fly, letting it hang out, and that's good for a backup quarterback. It keeps the offense moving. He's going to start the rest of the year, and I think that's good news for Quick. I mentioned Britt earlier. He's a guy I could see making a few surprise plays this week. The tight end situation I probably will avoid with Jared Cook. San Francisco's been, just lights out against tight ends this year, and Travis Kelce scored a touchdown last week, but other than that, they pretty much held him in check. So Jared Cook's already a risky guy to begin with, and so this week I'm definitely not interested in him going against that 49ers defense. Patrick Willis just too scary of a proposition. And other than that, on the Rams offense, the running back situation is kind of interesting to me. Really let me know, if you have any news on what's going on with the running backs there, Dan. But I noticed that Cunningham actually played more snaps than Zach Stacy last week. And he's a guy who gets involved in the passing game, so maybe it won't be so bad. The last week the Eagles fell behind really early, and had to play catch up against the Eagles. The Rams did, and so this is one that is interesting to me. Is Cunningham going to get more play than Zach Stacy going forward? I don't know. Is it going to be more of an even split? This week, I'm really not interested in starting either. San Francisco's secondary has kind of fallen off, but their front still looks as aggressive and as nasty as ever. Especially, a grinder type like Zach Stacy. This is a matchup where I shy away from playing him. And for the 49ers side, I think this Rams defense has not looked good. They're not pressuring the passer like we thought they would. Robert Quinn has only 1 sack, I think, through the first 5 weeks. They're not getting a lot of heat on the quarterback, and the rest of their defense is average at best. So I can see the passing game having a good outing. And I know we saw him make a few spectacular plays like we always do, but Brandon Lloyd could actually have a decent. Maybe he's getting more involved in the offense going forward. I'm kind of interested to see that. Not necessarily playing him in any cash games on daily fantasy or in any of my standard lineups, but he's one that I want to monitor. I want to see if he's getting more rapport with Kaepernick, because it certainly looked like he was getting open in the early parts of the week, or the early parts of the season. Just Kaepernick wasn't really finding him. So I'm interested to see what kind of role he has going forward. And as far as the rest of the Rams offense, 49ers offense, Frank Gore I think is a good play this week, sort of steady producing like he always does. But again, that rest of that offense, I'm not all that interested in. Just too much weirdness going on with Michael Crabtree. He's just sort of fallen out of favor with me. The rest of the receivers are just, exactly. So, Dan, do you have any takes on this game? Any strong thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I love Gore in this matchup as personally he's my favorite guy in the whole matchup. The Rams' run defense is not very strong. They had a decent week numbers-wise against the Eagles last week. They gave up a total of $130 to McCoy and Sproles, which isn't even great, but for them it's good. But they've been one of the worst run defenses for the past 2 years now, and I think that the Niners have found a way to really dominate them. Last year, I remember Gore had one of his biggest games in the first matchup with the Rams. And like you mentioned, I'm a little nervous about the receiver situation. Crabtree didn't play; he played like 66 or around like under 70% of the snaps last week. Maybe he's dealing with an injury. I'm really not sure what's going on there. And just to touch on the running back situation real quick. So last week, Stacy came out with an injury, and I think that was why Cunningham probably got more snaps. But before this, like I've been tracking these every week in my ticking timeshare column, and they kind of ran an even split with snaps for most of the entire season. Cunningham, as you mentioned, took the passing game role and had dominated pass down snaps, and Stacy the opposite. But then 2 weeks ago, before this last week, when Stacy got hurt, Stacy finally got utilized in the passing game. He had 5 or 6 catches and a ton of extra points for PPR leagues. I wonder if they're going to try to do that going forward. He's a solid talent in my opinion. He's got good burst, good short area quickness, and he could be utilized that way in the passing game. But like you mentioned, there's something going on with this Cunningham thing, and he's getting a lot of pass down snaps, and it's more of an even time split. So I don't love Stacy in this tough matchup either.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm definitely a little shying away from Stacy this weekend, maybe even going forward, depending on what happens Monday night. But do you want to run through our last matchup here, Dan, before we take a few more questions and get out of here?
Sure. What's the last matchup we're taking again, Matt?
I think we decided on the Cowboys and the Seahawks.
All right. Okay. So this, to me, is an interesting matchup because you got a team like the Dallas Cowboys who clearly have been able to impose their will in their first 5 games, and they're out to a 4-1 record because of it. And they control the clock. They have this blueprint where they run the ball, they control the clock, they keep their defense off the field, and have them, only having to make limited plays. It's kind of like the blueprint I was talking about earlier with the Chargers and Mike McCoy. But how are they going to do that? What happens when they meet the Seahawks and their impressive run defense? Now, the Seahawks, which is interesting to me, have not been as good against the pass this year. They haven't been generating the same pass rush they have, and their secondary is clearly worse without Walter Thurman as their dominant nickel, and without Brandon Browner, who didn't even play that much last season, but he's still a great talent. And it's just a clearly worse secondary. Cam Chancellor is banged up. He may not go today. It's looking likely that he'll be out. So I think the play here is to look towards your Des Bryant and your Tony Romo even, if you're really desperate for Cowboys. I personally wouldn't start Romo if I could bench him, but I would start Des. I think that this game is going to get out of control and not go in the Cowboys' favor. I think that they don't really have the talent to stop Russell Wilson. It's in Seattle. They'll get out to an early lead and they'll be able to impose their will, and then the Dallas will finally have to abandon their running game. So this is the first week where I'm not playing DeMarco Murray in my dailies. I've been using him as a guarantee play in every daily lineup until this week, and it's been working. But yeah, I just see that their offensive line will lose the battle to the Seattle front as Seattle commits to stop the run, and they'll be able to kind of impose their will and get out to too big of a lead. How do you see it, Matt?
Yeah, it's one that I think a lot of people are going to panic because they see these guys like Des Bryant and DeMarco Murray going against the great Seahawks defense. But you're right, it hasn't been – I mean, it's been great. No, it hasn't been lights-out dominant like it was last season. So, for that reason, I don't think you can bench DeMarco Murray. I mean, maybe you definitely don't probably want to pay up for his price on daily fantasy sites this week. So I think that's a good call there. But at the same time, you can't bench him in your standard league lineups because he still might, catch a few. He's a good pass catcher, so if they're playing from behind, as I'm sure they will be, you can still play him, hoping he catches a couple passes. And he probably won't get that 100 yards and a touchdown streak. He might not take that for another week, but you never know. he could break a long run. You just don't know. So you don't bench a guy like DeMarco Murray. And Des Bryant, we didn't get to talk about this with TJ, but he's only 6,600, I think, on DraftKings this week, something like that. So I actually have him. He's a guy that I have in a few DraftKings lineups, and I think he's got probably has a pretty low ownership percentage because the feared matchup with the Seahawks secondary. But you're right, it hasn't been a shutdown secondary like it was last season. In general, Dez plays on the left side of the field over the right side of the field, so he won't be matched up with Richard Sherman all that often. The Seahawks, they just don't move him around, and that's just the way their defense works. So I think Dez could still have a really good game in a come-from-behind sort of mode. So I think this is one that you don't really want to just shy away from your Cowboys just because of the matchup. And on the Seahawks side, I think the Seahawks offense is pretty predictable at this point. That it's Lynch, Wilson, and Harvin are really the only playable guys. The rest of them are really just going to be unpredictable. The receivers, they're rotating in and out. Nobody else is consistent outside of Harvin. So Lynch is really still the guy in the offense, and I think he could have a really great game against Dallas at home. So that's it for our matchup segment this week. We're going to run through I think we got one more question while we were talking, and we'll answer that real quick before we get on out of here. And this one comes from @WakeUpHicks00 on Twitter. And he asks us, Joik Bell or Michael Floyd for flex now that Palmer is back? It's a half-point PPR. I think that I'm going to wait and see. Now, because Carson Palmer is apparently going to play this week, it's looking like he's going to start, which is great news for a Cardinals offense that was really kind of going down the tank, especially the passing game. Michael Floyd was suffering, under the constant changing quarterback situation. Despite the fact that in the early part of the season it really looked like he was ready to break out as a wide receiver one. Having Carson Palmer back is going to be huge for him. So I actually think I'm going to go with Joik Bell, though, in this situation. Minnesota's defense really hasn't been scary. We've seen them get trampled at times, even by the ground game, and I think Joik is a good play with Reggie going to miss this game, with Calvin Johnson going to miss this game. Bell should catch a few passes out of the backfield, and in general, and he'll always be the goal line back in that offense when he's healthy. And now that he is, I think he's a really good play and a guy who could score a lot this week. So Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, so I really like both. I don't think that you can really go wrong here. I think Floyd will get more targets than Fitzgerald, but to me, Bell is the clear play. As I mentioned before, and this was in daily leagues, Bell's role is just the daily leagues haven't quite caught up to the role Bell's going to have this week. So again, the Vikings' run defense isn't that bad, but last week they finally showed some signs of getting gashed against the Packers with Eddie Lacy, and Bell has a chance to be a real workhorse this week with Theo Riddick taking in a few of his snaps, but I can see Bell getting about 70-80% of the snaps. And what worries me about Carson Palmer and the Cardinals' passing situation is that are they playing Palmer because he's fully healthy and he's showing more, or are they playing Palmer because they think even a 50 or 40% Palmer is better than Logan Thomas, their other option, since Stanton hadn't cleared the concussion protocol? So, and I think I would tend to believe that if I had to take a guess, that it's more towards the latter. I mean, I think that Palmer wasn't looking good when he was throwing in practice this week, and that's even what the report said. They said he was throwing up some of his old softballs that he threw up after leaving the Bengals, or when he first had these problems with his arm. So I think it could be a very toned down, check down type of offensive performance for this Cardinals offense. They might scale back some of the plays, and that'll take away some of the big playability from Floyd. So to me, it's Bell all the way. Better chance at scoring, much bigger role, and I just don't trust Palmer's arm right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think we agree there. And also, just a few inactive and running back notes that I've gotten throughout the show. We can just end on this note. It looks like Terrence West, even though he's healthy, is going to be an inactive this week, I heard, against the Steelers, which I think is good news for Isaiah Crowell and kind of sort of cementing him as the second running back there. So I like that. It looks like Reggie Bush is out, as we mentioned, along with Calvin Johnson. Storm Johnson is going to start for the Jaguars, and I think he's a really I think he's a really good play this week in a PPR league, especially. I think you can't discount the connection that he and Bortles have from their UCF days. Bishop Sankey is going to start for the Titans, and last one I got, also probably the biggest one of note, is it looks like Jonathan Stewart is going to surprisingly miss another game. So a shocking development as always. But that's about all the time we have this week. We appreciate you guys sticking with us through some technical difficulties there in the middle, and really appreciate everybody that watches and all the questions we get. It's so awesome to be able to connect with you guys and answer questions, and it's something Dan and I, we love doing it, and we're glad that you like communicating with us and enjoy our takes. So thanks again for tuning in, everybody. And Dan, any final words from you before we sign off?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like Matt said, I love the questions, and I mean, like, when I get them on Twitter, I can answer, but it's tough because I'm limited by characters. Here, me and Matt have the opportunity to go into matchups, go into all the factors, what makes the decision our decision. So, again, send away. The show's powered and fueled by you guys. So it's another great week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking through the technical difficulties, like Matt said, and have a great week 6.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. The long form is a lot better for me than just the limited characters. So, yeah, great stuff, Dan. As always, appreciate you joining me here every Sunday morning. And again, thanks to all the watchers, listeners, everything like that. So, good luck to everyone in their fantasy games this week. Hope if any one of our listeners or viewers wins big money this week, tweet at us, let us know. We'd love to hear about it and be jealous. So, Good luck to everybody, and we'll see you all. Thanks again,
guys.